Okay, we talked about stocks and bonds, but basically what you have is you've got some sort of an owner over here that has an account that has, say, 5 of Intel. And they're holding these 5 units, these 5 shares, these 5 whatever they are. And this is not US dollars. That's the main currency in the United States. This is the currency of Intel. And they've said to Intel, you take my money, you invest it, you make more money in the future, but for our purposes, what counts is we've got a person over here that has 5. And we've got another person over here, okay, that has 5,000. So basically what we have is for stocks and bonds, we have this giant list that basically has two pieces in it. It's a who and it's a count. And 5 of these are not different than 5 of these. They're mutable, they're interchangeable. There's no discerning marks that make them different from one another. It's just basically an account, which probably is the index here, how we get to who it is, and the quantity. So, given that we have a blockchain that's a ledger, could we build something like this, where we've got these 2 pieces of information, a who and a count. Now, Intel has its own magic account, we'll put them down here, that says 5 million or something like that. And I guess that's 500,000, not 5 million. But I have this many to sell. I have created them magically out of nothing. So they can change the number down here. And they can change it going both up and down. So when we build this thing, we've got to have these capabilities. We've got to say, well, the only people that have the right to create more down here is this one special account. And they can mint them, they can create them, they can destroy them. Companies do stock buybacks and decrease their number of stocks. They issue more stock, so they can do these things. But they're the only ones that have the right to do this. No one else has that right. Now, the way the stock market works is there are certain banks, very specialized banks, that hold all of the shares. And they say for a particular one of these that we hold this many shares, and when somebody wants to buy some, what we'll do is we'll lend out some of these shares, say 5,000, to an intermediary. That intermediary will transfer it to this person, and they think they own the shares. And as long as they have lent it out properly and all these things work together, that's what's really going on. Okay? They own the shares. They have the right to turn around and sell that to another person. Okay? Okay, so they can transfer shares from one to the other. Now, we've got 3 different shareholders out there. This one now owns 0, I think. But they've gotten a right to transfer and they buy and sell them. Now, what happened with Dole Foods is really kind of a complicated thing. These clearinghouses out here have an amount of time that it takes to clear things, which is about 3 days. Okay? But these people out here, they go out to their Ameritrade, their E-Trade, their Schwab account, and they transfer the things and they expect them to see them in a few seconds. And the human beings are the really slow ones because there's also computers out there transferring things. Okay? And they expect to be able to transfer things in milliseconds. So all of this transfer that happens quickly is facilitated by these loans. Now, the intermediary brokers, they go out, they borrow some, usually in a very specialized way. They don't actually borrow it. What they do is they buy the right to own some of these at a future point in time. That's called a future. And at that future point in time, then they have to show that they actually own that many. But that doesn't necessarily mean that before that they can't sell that right, buy the right again, hundreds of times. So this ownership layer right here is very, let's put a question mark with it, questionable. It's not clear who owns it. And at the end of each year, the company down here is supposed to do things like contact all the real owners and say, vote on the board members. But there's this layer in here that's very iffy as to who owns it on the day that they have to have it shown. So that's not totally clear. And, you know, these things can trade a lot in between. Let alone that, you know, if I don't have stock in something, but I want to sell it, I can buy a future and I can borrow stock and sell it. Or if I don't have the stock and I want to buy it, I can make an offer where I'll buy it in the future and be able to return a loan for it. So all of these things interact to make it very unclear who out here actually owns the stock. Now, on a blockchain, we'd have clear ownership because we have a system that allows us to synchronize all the nodes in the chain and get a state of ownership of a ledger, if we had a ledger like this. And we have to have some other things along the way. Quite often when a company first starts up, this is probably not true of Intel today, but when they first start up, they couldn't just sell their stock to anyone. As a new startup, they were legally required to only sell their stock to certain kinds of investors that are known entities. And you're also not supposed to do banking with certain kinds of people, like, say, Oleg Deripaska, a Russian oligarch, because he's sanctioned. So there may be limits on who you can sell. So you've got limits down here. So you have to have approvals. Okay? And collectively, you've got this kind of a behavior. Now, if you want to take the behavior of stocks, bonds, things that are fungible being, you know, these 5 are not different than 5 down here. It's only the count, and it's really only the account of who owns it. This kind of a process in the Ethereum world is called an erc20. It's kind of a weird name. It's a Ethereum protocol, but it was the first one to implement this, and consequently, you know, they got the naming rights. Their choice of names is really bizarre. But basically, this was Defect 20 when they implemented Ethereum in GitHub. And consequently, this is how they addressed Defect 20, was with an implementation of these kind of a contracts. Today, there is an ERC20 standard. And if you go to a lot of the things like Coinbase or Kraken, and you create a token, they will want an ERC20 interface to it. That's how they can contact you and tell you this person bought or sold, this amount was traded, this is how it was traded. Now, the other thing that you would have in this kind of a system is you would have some sort of an initial price, because remember, dollars are our currency that we all use, at least here in the United States, and you'd say that an initial sale when Intel was started might be $1 for each share. So you have some sort of a price that for you to be able to buy it initially, you had to be approved and you had to pay them this amount of money. So you request approval and then you say, I will buy 100 shares, here's $100, okay? They now have a smile and they give you this number in their accounting system. So this interface here is what we're going to talk about, is how this works. Now, I'm going to show you the simplest contract you can for an ERC20. There is a library out there called OpenZeppelin that is built by the Ethereum Foundation. I'm not certain why they called it OpenZeppelin, but I'm certain they had some sort of a reason. And this OpenZeppelin has a bunch of these different things. Like it has a pre-built ERC20 contract where you only really have to specify 4 things. And there are defaults for 2 of them. So those 4 things is the name, okay, the symbol, okay, so you have some sort of name. We're going to use the name example token, I think. You have the symbol, which I think I put down as ETX. You have the quantity that you want minted, okay. If you don't give a default quantity, it won't mint any. And you have the number of decimal places. because sometimes somebody comes in here and they want to buy 5.2 of these things. So you tell it how many decimal places. The default number of decimal places is 18. So if you don't specify it, you get 18 decimal places worth of fractional amounts that can be traded. But 3 of these you're probably going to want to specify. What it's called, what its symbol is. You'd have to do some research if you want to get it traded these days, that you're not overlapping somebody else's symbol. And the same thing for the name, but it's probably easier to not overlap there. And how many? Do you want 500,000? Do you want 20 billion? So you specify those things basically in the constructor for this class, and you call the piece of code, and it sets up a program that has this symbol and this tracking information. And then you can approve sales and say, for a particular amount, I want to sell it for some particular initial amount. And that's what it takes. The difference here is the one thing that you can't do with this is it's not set up where you can have this bad, ugly, and internal layer. It's not set up for loans. It's set up for when you transfer something, you transfer it in a transaction that happens, in Ethereum's case, within about 22 seconds. And at the end of that transaction, you've actually transferred it. There's no in-between, there's no loans. As opposed to on the stock market, things are really bought and sold in 3 days. Plus a bunch of other very unusual behaviors. So let's go take a look at the actual contract. In the notes today, I've got not just the contract, but the supporting code. But I'm going to walk you through what the interface is, and we'll look at what these pieces are and how they're implemented. And we're going to have a 4th homework assignment that is in Go that has to do with wallets. But I wanted to bring this out first because when you start talking about wallets, we're going to start talking about, well, how do we have security to make these transactions happen? What keeps anybody from being able to mint more of these? And how do the signatures work? So unless you see the motivation for, this is what we're trying to get out of the security, I don't think that's quite going to make sense. So this piece is one kind of contract. The other one, and we're going to look at that separately, is a thing called an ERC721. And an ERC721 is a non-fungible item, as in you can't have fractional ones, and when you transfer, you're transferring not just a count, but you're also transferring a unique identifying number, a unique identifying sequence value, a unique identifying something that is unique to that item. It's like the serial number on a dollar bill, except in this case, you're using that serial number for something. And the example we're going to do when we do ERC 721 is grouse credits. And of course, the thing with a grouse credit, it's a little bird and you have protect the land so they can do nesting during nesting season, is which piece of land did you protect? Okay, and nowhere in here is there a outside world piece that says that this is the thing that this is associated with. These are all fungible. So when we get to non-fungible ones, then we're going to look at here's how you hang on to that piece of information that says it is this. And ERC 721 was developed for a thing called Kitties, which are digital cats. They're a collectible, and you can buy them and breed them and make money for breeding them. And they have cute pictures. It's worth going into Google and Googling on Google Images, Kitties. Some of them are worth a lot. Yes, I own 2. They're completely worthless. I just wanted to understand how the contract worked, and I was willing to spend, I don't know, $20 or something like that on 2 Kitties. They're not even worth $20 today. But, you know, I wanted to find out how the contract worked, and the easy way to do that was actually just get involved and try it and see what it does. So I have a couple worthless Kitties. But when we talk about an initial coin offering, this is the thing we're talking about. And those ICOs, there are limits on what you can do these days with ICOs. The Security and Exchange Commission looks at it as it being a security that you're offering for good reason. There are things that they classify as non-securities, both legally and other things. You could have one of these that is a non-security, but that means that there's no financial reward for the person. You're not purchasing something that has an income that comes with it. you're purchasing something that maybe has a value like a license for a piece of software. And you may account for how many a person owns in the same fashion. You could build a license manager that works based off of this. But the person isn't getting a reward for owning it. They're using it for something. It's an asset that, maybe they want to be able to buy this software, use it, and turn around. And maybe it's for various reasons. It could be sold later, but it's not sold because it's making them a profit like an investment. It's sold because it is a tangible asset that you're selling. So most tangible assets are going to fall in down here in the ERC721. I don't exclude the possibility up here, but usually these things are an initial coin offering. Let's go take a look at the code.